It's U of L Today on 93.9 The Ville. Here's your host, Mark Hebert.
And welcome to UofL Today with Mark Hebert on 93.9 The Ville. For those of you who listen to the program on a semi-regular basis, you know usually we talk to students, faculty, and staff about all the great things going on at the University of Louisville. Usually research, academics, programming, those kinds of things. Well, we're going to switch gears just a little bit today because I've got two guests in the studio. We're going to talk a little bit about athletics. Vince Tyra is the interim athletic director at the University of Louisville, and the interim president of the University of Louisville is Greg Postel. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you for having us.
Good to see you. You know, you two have got something in common that you probably didn't realize, that just about everybody in this market mispronounces your name at least once.
That's for sure.
It's Postel. So, and Vince, you get Tyra, I'm sure, all the time, right? Because that's how I said it before I met you.
Yeah, that's right. Everybody thinks it's a short A, not a long A, to use the academic sense.
So, Dr. Postel, why don't you say your name?
Greg Postel.
See, it's easy. Postel, right? And Vince, why don't you say your last name?
Vince Tyra.
There you go. Tyra, R-A-Y, right?
That's right.
And not spelled that way. All right. Well, let's get into it a little bit here. Dr. Postel, when you went and talked to the Louisville Forum a couple of weeks ago, you said that you right off the top, when you were talking to this group, you said athletics is the elephant in the room. And that's how you kind of started your speech. So what did you mean by that? And why'd you get to start your talk there with the Louisville Forum, talking right off the top about athletics?
Well, I use that term to describe a topic that's important and a topic that can't be avoided because it's a big part of the University of Louisville. And so therefore, we're not trying to avoid talking about athletics. As a matter of fact, we're spending a lot of time talking about it and how we can build on the great things we have here, and that was the reference.
Right. And your background, you're not from a sports background, you're a doctor. So as you took over the University of Louisville as the interim president and you had to get into these athletic issues, how's it been trying to ferry through these things?
Well, it's actually been great fun. People say I'm not from an athletic background, but I grew up swimming and playing tennis and going to sporting events and have been a sports fan all my life. My wife was a varsity athlete in college. Her mother is a sports fan. She was a gymnast.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, I perhaps have not been employed in the athletics field, but that doesn't mean I'm not interested. And of course, a lot of athletics is business, and so business is something I know a lot about. I've been doing that for decades, and so there are certain things that fit very nicely in managing athletics.
And Vince, from your standpoint, your background isn't in athletics either, but you've owned a number of companies. So why don't you give folks kind of a background of who Vince Tyra is?
Yeah, well, I've been fortunate, I started in healthcare, ironically, as Greg knows, and spent some time with Humana before venturing off into my own entrepreneurial world. So, I realized at an early age I had that blood in me, and got involved in a business in my early 20s, and it was very successful. And from that led to other corporate opportunities to be the president of Fruit of Loom, and then on to CEO positions, and later got involved with a private equity firm, private investment firm, as most would say. And we owned and operated a number of companies, and a half dozen of those I was chairman of the board of. So right. I've got the example of being on both sides of the table as chairman of the board and a CEO.
So you've been the chief cheese at a number of different places, and here you're the chief cheese of the athletics department at the University of Louisville. So how would you describe your management style, and how has that fit with what you're having to do at the University of Louisville?
Well, I think, I got a lot of responsibility at a young age. I was certainly quite different. If I went back 20 years ago and being president of Fruit of Loom in my early 30s, which I don't think the board realized my age at that time, was great. I mean, I learned a lot, and it really evolved to what I am today as far as a manager. I try to be helpful without being intrusive, and more of a teacher mentality where I try to be collaborative, but I understand I'm the referee, to use an athletic term, and I got to be decisive. And I've done that, but I think we do discuss things, and then we make a decision. We all support it, because you can have naysayers on your team, and I think in this situation it's highly important that we have that everybody's rowing in the same direction. We're all supportive, and that's for me to control that environment. But it's very similar. There's a lot of same fundamentals in this business as it would be any other business.
So what have you found walking into the athletic department at the University of Louisville? Have you had to be a fixer? Are you just a caretaker? Are you having to be a top-down guy? What are you having to be?
Well, it's a lot of both, but I would say very hands-on. The situation dictates that. But I think when you go into this, I would say there's leaders at every level. So I'm trying to find where the leaders are in every level of the athletic department. It may be someone at the front desk and Valerie that's helpful as leader in terms of how they approach guests. and people go to her for advice, whether it be personal or business. You find those leaders, and that's what I've tried to do in terms of being hands-on, and also in our donor base and our fan base. And I'd even go so far as to, meeting with the villains, our student group, try to get them. I'm challenging those guys just like I would anybody else. But, I think my style is active. I think in this one, it's more about time management, because you can easily get your schedule carried away with, the number of sports we have, the number of coaches and so forth, and being really responsive to time management, how we handle that.
Talking with Vince Tyra, who's the interim athletic director at the University of Louisville, and Dr. Greg Postel, the interim president at the University of Louisville. Dr. Postel, when you hired him, what'd you tell Vince? What'd you want from him?
Well, first of all, I was flattered that he was interested because, as Vince has pointed out, he has had a very distinguished career. And you said a moment ago that he doesn't come from an athletics background, but in many ways he does. He was a varsity athlete also, and his father was a varsity athlete here at the University of Louisville many years ago. So, having someone who has the business knowledge and the athletics knowledge and the ability to quickly shift gears in his life and step into an all-consuming role like this was quite amazing for us. And so I was flattered and appreciative. And I guess I asked him if he was sure he knew what he was getting into, because people asked me the same thing a year ago, and I said yes, and I meant it, and
You still mean it?
Yes, I do, and I have the sense that he did too.
And Vince, you still mean it?
Yeah, absolutely.
You knew what you were getting into?
No, I think I unfortunately probably clearly knew what I was getting into, but I've enjoyed it too.
Okay. There's been a lot of talk on the street, as you might imagine, and especially inside the university, that there was this divide between the athletics department and the academic side of the university. Whether that was real or imagined, what are you two doing to try and heal that, whether it's real or imagined?
Yeah.
Well, we spent a lot of time talking. We spent 5 hours talking on Wednesday of this week while doing some traveling and making sure that our list of to-dos match up. And I'm fortunate. Vince thinks about things very much the same way I do. So there's been a very nice symbiotic relationship start to develop, and we can help each other with the things where we need some assistance.
And where does it go ahead, Vince?
I was going to say, I think I recognize the importance of the foundation to the university and to the athletics. I mean, those three, as we say, legs of the stool are important. They have to be in balance. So I think part of it is, my style is to be collaborative. My style is to be open and direct. I don't mind bringing issues to head. I don't mind confrontation. You don't get to where I've got to and do the things you do if you don't hit things head on, and also be open and sharing. So my style is that way, and I think I recognize as a fan and an outsider what was, the perception was as well, and so that's something I've tried to address head on. Greg and I do talk regularly, basically daily. And I'm not sure that was going on. I think with David Grissom, I speak to David as needed as well. And I have those relationships with most of our business and community leaders and some of our board of trustees and UofL board members and foundation board members. So it helps easing that thought pattern. But I also recognize that part of my role is education, that educating, whether it be Greg or whether it be the various board members as to the importance of athletics and how it operates and how I believe it should operate, and that's what we're after.
There's a lot of talk about athletics being subsidized by the academic side of the university, and a lot of people were ticked off when they read some stories in the newspaper. Dr. Postel, what's the rest of the story on that, or is there a rest of the story on that?
No, there is a rest of the story, and we've tried to explain it, but it's complicated, so it warrants explaining again. There is some expense on the part of athletics that's paid for by the university. That's true. But coincident with that, there is tuition for varsity athletes paid by the University of Louisville Athletics Association to the university. So there's money coming back in the other direction to pay the tuition and living expenses for the student athletes. So when you net those out, the university is not subsidizing athletics.
Okay. At the bottom line, Vince?
Yeah, I think it's the bottom line. I mean, we've got 295 scholarship athletes, and we've got 611 in total. So some of those obviously we're funding out of the athletic department, and then the others are funded on their own. They're walk-ons, as you would know.
Vince, what's the biggest surprise you found since you walked into the job as the athletic director?
Probably just the time demands of the various sports, because there was a number of things going on at that time, not just in men's basketball, but there's other things that needed attention. So I think that's the thing, is just to figure out the time management to get with all these different constituents. And certainly there's, when I say that, I mean donors as well as and corporate sponsors, as well as the head coaches, and I took it on to meet with all the student athletes. So that took quite a bit of time out of the schedule, just to go meet with every single student athlete and explain to them where we are and what we're doing. Anything
new on the FBI investigation that you can publicly state or not state? Nothing new? Routine
No, I don't
stuff?
think there's anything new. I mean, I think they're continuing their investigation. We get very limited knowledge. I don't think we can act on anything we don't know. And while we're continuing our own internal investigation, so I don't know that Greg would disagree with that.
No.
Are you too worried that the current investigation of the basketball program might hurt our appeal to the NCAA on the previous investigation? Or are they totally separate?
Well, we certainly hope that there's no relationship. They're completely separate issues, and as it pertains to the appeal, it's a very limited appeal based on just some technicalities in how the penalties were assessed. So my hope is that they don't overlap in any way.
Okay.
Same
thing.
I expect the same. I mean, they treat these historically;
Separate.
they're independent, not always, in some cases, not even the same people on those. So.
Talking with Dr. Greg Postel, the interim president at the University of Louisville, and Vince Tyra, the interim athletic director at UofL. And Vince, you've got a new program you're trying to get started to put some ethical standards in,
right,
or an ethical class on ethics with the athletic department. Why don't you describe what that is?
Well, I think we're working closely. One of the first things I talked about in joining the athletic department is working with Dean Meridian, Todd Meridian, the College of Business, and then he later brought on Ryan Quinn, Professor Quinn, who's done some work in ethical business practices. And we've talked about the temptations of these 20s and 30-year-old people that are sitting in athletic departments in key positions, and whether they've had the proper training business-wise to avoid the temptations, whether they be assistant coach or an associate athletic director. So we've talked about that. I've explained the program to John Swafford, the commissioner of the ACC. He had me speak to the athletic directors. They were highly intrigued. We've carried that over. I've spoke to Mark King, the head of Adidas that we deal with. He's intrigued and wants to invest along with it. I've offered to put up $100,000 of my own money. Adidas has offered to match those dollars, and then we've talked about how we can get this program going to get some funding behind the College of Business with Dean Meridian and Ryan Quinn's guidance.
So would these be classes, or would these be just programs for athletic department employees?
No, these are more with the classroom setting. We're trying to figure this out as to those that have interest in it. We're obviously want to start with our group selfishly, and we've looked at it in two different fashions. We're far enough along now where we're down to thinking about the resource we need, whether they're going to be software training, in-class training, how often to meet, and then how we would take it further. Then I think the other thing is, since there's outside interest from other schools and certainly from Adidas, as to how we could create a program that potentially would train the trainer, where we would train others and they could take it back to their organizations. But we want to go for, be the leader in this.
Right. Dr. Postel, another issue that folks are talking about is the budget side of athletics, in that it seems that attendance is down, not just at college football games or college basketball games, but you're talking Major League Baseball, NFL. People just aren't going to as many sporting events as they did in the past and seeing them live. So are you worried that at some point that this could come crashing down on the budget of the University of Louisville and UK and Western and everybody else? Is the model just a bad model?
We're certainly paying close attention to it. I don't think it falls into the category of worry, to use your term. What you mentioned, there's a national phenomenon where attendance at games is not what it used to be, and there are a variety of reasons for that. It's too convenient to sit in a warm living room and watch a show, or record it and watch it later. And so we have to be continually aware of ways to make the venues more attractive, find ways to get people out to the games, events associated with the games themselves. And, it's a business like anything else. And so we're very aware of attendance, and we'll work on ways to maximize it.
And Vince, that top of mind for you?
Yeah, it is, because, as a fan, I got to value where I spend my money as well. And they all vote with their wallet. So I think that as I've been a donor to the university, I try to put myself in their shoes, and that, obviously you get your own opinion. But I'm trying to weigh the opinions of our corporate sponsors, what they're doing. Some of them have been in the same platform for many years in terms of what they want to do. I'm trying to meet with some of those to say, what would you like? Let's mix it up a little bit. our individual donors, how we can treat them, and then, as I mentioned before, all the way down to our students and meeting with the villains, our student group, and talking about that. Fan experience is key. And I mean, everybody's got the country club, kind of syndrome here, right? Where you got discretionary dollars and what you want to do with your money, and it's parlaying into sports. So I think that's our view is grassroots efforts. How do you get people to come there and have a great time and they value their ticket?
Talking with Vince Tyra, interim athletic director at UofL, and also Dr. Greg Postel, interim president of the University of Louisville. You're a busy guy. It's not like Dr. Postel's schedule here.
Yeah, no, there's not much
busy
time.
Guy. All right, the academic success of our athletics program has just been phenomenal. Nobody can dispute that. What do you do to keep that going? The student athletes, they're graduating, their GPAs are good, they're doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, well, this is a great story, and it's a story about you get success where you apply resources, and so resources have been applied to ensuring the academic success of student athletes here, making sure their GPAs are adequate, making sure they're graduating, making sure their APRs are competitive with other schools in the conference. And it's a byproduct of the fact that we've invested money in this and we have good people focused on it. And we've got the Thornton Center for Academic Performance and that sort of thing. And so you ask, are we interested in continuing it? It's more than that. We're interested in generalizing this to our entire population of students because we've proved with the athletes that we can create success. And so there's no reason that can't be replicated, but it takes resources to do so. And so, I think athletics in this regard can be a model in terms of how focused attention on student success works.
Have you put that at the top of your list, Vince?
Yeah, it
Keep
has.
that going? Marvin Mitchell
definitely.
and company?
Marvin does a terrific job. Alyssa Murphy over there in career development. That's where I was Wednesday night. It was a volunteer for the student athletes. I offered to do a Life After Sports session with them for an hour on Wednesday night, and I was happy to see we had over 100 kids of our 600 that showed up, that came and sat in the auditorium, and they're interested to know about that. But we have had great success on the academic side. It's as important in recruiting as it is having a great facility. It really is. I think when these parents turn their kids over to us, that as I think about in recruiting, and as I was recruited one day, is how do you win all ties? And you got to have that academic sense to win all ties when that parent wants to know what's going to happen to that kid, because very few of them are actually going to be a professional athlete and earn a living that way. So we got to show them we're going to win all ties and we're going to take these kids to another level.
Well, we got a minute and a half or so left here, so I got a couple questions for you, Vince. Number one, any thoughts of adding any sports? Wrestling, men's lacrosse?
Yeah, I mean, not at this time. It's not on the agenda because I think I'm trying to just get comfortable with what we have, securing it, getting a better understanding where this goes, and staying focused on our current issues. You can imagine men's basketball. It's so important to our revenue base. And before we think about adding additional, I'll say non-revenue sports at this point.
And do you want the AD job full-time?
Well, I think it's something I've always said it's unfair to the coaches to put them in that spot as much as for myself to really make sure that I can add value to them. I've been a student athlete. I've had two brothers, my father. We know this part well. I've been very close. I walked right into the job and knew all the senior staff. So that's been helpful with me. But if I can't add value to the program and to the coaches and our sponsor and donors, there's no reason for me to even think about it. So I'm looking for that response to help me with that decision.
We are with Dr. Greg Postel, the interim president of the University of Louisville. We're going to talk about some issues other than athletics and sports here. What was the biggest challenge when you walked into the job, when you said, it didn't scare you away when you got appointed interim president, but what was the biggest challenge you had to face in the first few months?
Well, I like challenges, and
you like these kind of challenges?
Well, there can be too much of anything in life. So, given that I like challenges, there were a lot of them, and so I think the real trick was to place things in the proper order and try to understand what needed to be dealt with first, and sort of how to put a plan together for the year that's now getting ready to come to a close, and deal with the important issues in the correct order.
Right. I assume accreditation is at the top of the list, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So where are we on regaining full accreditation?
So we're in great shape. We've been working on this all year. It was at the top of the list we just talked about. And it required an awful lot of work. The SACS organization, this is that accredits the University of Louisville, only has one major meeting per year. It's in December. They have a smaller meeting in June, but all their big decision-making occurs at the December meeting. And so, as you'll recall, it was last December that the university's accreditation was placed on probation. So we knew that this December's meeting was going to be a big point in time for us. And so we've worked all year very closely with SACS to address the issues that they've raised. And I'm happy to say that we have answered all of their questions. We've fulfilled all of their requests, and we have produced a tremendous amount of material in response to their concerns. We had a site visit from a SACS committee back in September of this year, where they came on campus to review materials over a 3-day period and meet with many of our team members to talk about the changes that had been taking place. And so now I'm happy to say that next week the big meeting is finally here. And so I'll be traveling to Dallas for the annual meeting of SACS. I've been asked to speak about the work that we've done. I think they're going to have some questions and want some further clarification around these issues. And then they actually vote. There are 77 members of this group that
small group.
Cast ballots, and we feel very confident that our probationary status will be lifted because we have addressed their concerns.
Very good. And I assume that's what you'll tell them.
That's what I'm going to tell them.
Okay. Budget. You were facing a $49 million hole in the last year's fiscal year. What about now? How's the university's budget?
You know, I have to say, one of the things that has continued to impress me in this job is how resilient the employees of the University of Louisville are, the faculty and the staff, how willing and able they are to step up, make sacrifices, work hard, and make sure the university is going to be okay. And that's what it's taken. Everyone has worked as a team. People have made sacrifices. People have done the work of two people for extended periods of time until we right the ship. And as a result, we are staying ahead of a very aggressive budget we set. And keep in mind that the budget we set is inclusive of fixing that $48 million gap that you referenced. So meeting the budget means that we have closed the gap. It's not as though we need to meet the budget and find $48 million.
Cuts, savings, et cetera. So, but this fiscal year, the 17-18 fiscal year, university's on track to meet that budget.
Yes.
And shouldn't be in a budget hole at the end of the year.
Correct.
All right. And there was no tuition increase this year for students, which you've been properly trumpeting. How about next year? What's the situation look like? Are you going to need a tuition increase next year?
So we would much rather generate revenue from tuition through having more students as opposed to charging existing students more per person. And so we've been extraordinarily aggressive in our campaign to find new students. And I'm delighted to say we've been successful. At this time last year, we had 4,500 applications for admission. This year, it's 7,500. Now, of course, they won't all come, but that's a really big year-over-year difference, and certainly a reasonable percentage of them will come. So obviously with that means new tuition dollars, of course also challenges for our faculty and staff and our facilities to make sure that we have room and that the faculty and staff have the time necessary to properly provide instruction to all these new students.
Chatting with Dr. Greg Postel, the interim president of the University of Louisville. What do you tell those students that we're trying to recruit to the University of Louisville? You've been on a couple of these recruiting trips to Northern Kentucky and elsewhere. What do you tell these high school kids about UofL?
Well, it's easy because there's a lot to brag about. We have 200 degree programs in 12 schools. We have over 400 programs, student organizations that our students can join and participate in. We have fabulous facilities, great dorms to live in, living and learning communities, a new academic building, a fantastic recreation center, a great athletics program, and all kinds of financial aid packages. Some of them are need-based, some of them are merit-based. So there's something for everyone at UofL. We impress that it's an inclusive, diverse campus, and we want everyone here to feel welcome, and we work hard at that.
We're on the list of Sierra Club's cool schools, LGBT-friendly campus.
That's right.
One of the top, I think, 20 in the country, I think. Had the largest graduating class ever last May, correct?
That's right.
So you got some good things going on.
Those things don't happen unless there's the right context. It has to be a welcoming place in order for those kinds of programs to thrive. And so we're proud of that.
Okay. Real quickly, UofL Hospital. Tell me about it.
University of Louisville Hospital is an amazing story. This is a hospital where the faculty and the staff who work there care so much about the place and about the patients they serve, that they were determined to make sure that that hospital would be successful going forward. And so over a very short period of time, the management of the University of Louisville Hospital was converted back to UMC. This was an
UMC
enormous
being the
University
of Louisville,
Medical.
basically.
Well, basically, it's
It's an
a
offshoot, right?
separate company, but it's basically UofL people. University Medical Center is the body that governs the hospital.
Right.
And we had to convert employment of 2,500 employees. We had to hire over 500 people. We hired 100 nurses, put new systems in place. And the hospital is busy. Surgeries are up 40%. The ER is full to the doors. People are getting excellent care there, and the staff who work there never noticed the change. They got a new badge,
Right.
But nobody missed a paycheck, and nothing bad happened.
Well, one of the changes they've noticed, I had Ken Marshall, who's the CEO of the hospital, on a couple of weeks ago, and he said they've hired 100 new nurses in the first 100 days of UofL taking, or UMC taking control of the hospital again. So that's pretty significant.
That was critically important. There were nurses working there, obviously, but many of them were traveling nurses who lived in other cities and who go from place to place. And we believe that the best care is delivered by permanent nurses who are there and who know the physicians and who know the facility and are in it for the long haul.
Okay, real quick, because we only got about a minute left or so. Why don't you give me the good news stories in the last couple of weeks from the University of Louisville? Reel them off. There's been a number of them, and I can help you if you want to know some of these.
We have been busy, and our Office of Communications and Marketing has been sending me all over the landscape to,
Yes, we have.
To give press conferences because there is a lot to talk about. So we have had many research awards that we've received. So Roberto Bolli, $13.8 million to study heart failure and the use of stem cells. Dr. Sanjay Srivastava, $5.7 million Superfund Award to help understand health impacts of environmental waste, unfortunately some of which is in our community. Dr. Anita Barbie, part of a $15 million grant, which is a consortium of universities to help provide support to social workers who do child welfare to prevent
And they're burning out,
burnout.
yeah.
We've had success to announce with industry partnerships. Yes, last week we had a press conference to discuss the opening of the Hive, which is a really neat collaborative project between Kindred and the University of Louisville, specifically our Speed School of Engineering, our computer science and computer engineering department, where we're working on computer apps to work with the elderly population and help with their healthcare needs. So there really seems to be no end to it. We've had success in our spinal cord injury research. Dr. Susie Harkemer and her team have a gentleman they've been working with for a few years who's able to stand without support, and he was paralyzed from the neck down. Mm-hmm. So, just a tip of the iceberg, and some of these stories are nice because they involve not just research, but they're also community service projects and also opportunities for our students to become engaged in the process. So we're really meeting multiple missions at the same time with some of these announcements.
So folks and listeners, if you're a UofL supporter and folks come up and are saying, hey, you hear about the latest headline at the University of Louisville, something bad has happened, you can point to all this good that's going on that we're trying to get out and tell folks about, because there's a lot of really, really good stuff going on at the University of Louisville right now. Last question, do you want the full-time president's job?
I do. We have been making progress, which causes me to feel good about the work of our team. As Mr. Tyra said earlier, as long as a person feels as though they can add some value, there's a reason to wish to remain in the job. And at this point, I feel that our team is adding value and making changes that are needed at the university. And so for that reason, I'm still interested.
All right, Dr. Greg Postel, appreciate you being on the program. Thanks for listening to UofL Today with Mark Hebert, and go Cards!